what kind of world does that take us to? Well, you can collapse the economy under the guise of war and then put this scatter wave out in front of everybody. So when the food losses come, the excuses are already baked in why there wasn't enough food. It all revolves around the food. Everything else on the periphery, that's all a distraction. Food production, extra calories allow a society to increase and grow its potential because there's extra calories, so you can do those mathematical problems. You can solve those engineering diagrams. You can come up with art because you got extra calories. You're not worried about growing your food for the day to stay alive. Who mapped it out in advance already and knows the onset, the amplification, and then at that point, when people become hungry, they become violent and unpredictable enough to flip governments. And it's all on a timeline. It seems like it's all scripted. We talked about this last time. They already know the cycle, so where are we in this whole A to B?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh. Welcome to the Red Pill Project's Daily Dose, live with you Monday through tonight. We are joined by David Dubine. If you do not know, he is the creator of Adapt 2030. David, what's up, man? How you been?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me back on again. And you know, that introductory video there, like Reagan had the crystal ball, did he not? I mean, he nailed it almost 100% as to what's happening today. But I will say one thing, if I might throw a woo thought to begin the conversation here. That point of the end of humanity, you know, it seems that it's a machine intelligence that is now using mass media to have humanity create the world it wants. So if you want to point a finger at what the enemy is, the evil, it's been brought to us. You know, through time immemorial, they had names for this same like vibrational intelligence. Could have been called the jinn, could be called darkness, evil, whatever it is. It has a vibratory pattern that's back in again. But at the same time, frequency changes on the sun, that big thing, that big yellow thing to the left over there, seem to go hand in hand. So I'm starting to wonder about these civilization collapses. How much darkness did they indeed experience, but was not cataloged because victors write history? So where does that leave us with this cycle again? But you're right. We hit it on the head last time about the general trend of where the world's going. So, you know, I'd like to talk about that again. Like, what do you and I both see where it moves from now over the next, 6 months or a year?
Well, you know, one of the things I know you've been talking about for years, as well as myself, is that the fear porn is obviously ramping up massively. I just saw that they found this major fault in California. They're going to expect a 9.0 earthquake any day now. I just posted that on my Twitter, and
seconds away.
And last week I actually covered the water wars aspect. Is that many states are running out of drinkable water, and it was interesting because in the article that they were talking about it wasn't the supply. There was no scarcity in the supply. It was the methodology of distribution wreaking havoc all over U.S. farmland. We just had, 18,000 cows die in an explosion at a dairy farm. We've had millions of chickens culled because of, right? And it seems that they are prepping the world for a scarcity situation, the scarcity being artificially produced and manipulated, but it's as if they know something.
Governments understood this in advance. Now, so you have to work as a world government body here. Would you come clean and tell the populace that, hey, we're going to this massive solar cycle. By the way, it collapsed all the other civilizations prior to it going back, 10,000 years or so post Younger Dryas era. But just keep paying your taxes, investing, not going to work like that.
This is Mysteries in the Histories. On January 23, 1959, 10 hikers set out for a winter hiking and camping trip through Russia's Ural Mountains. One of their group had turned back after several days for medical reasons, but the other 9 continued along with their trip. The 9 hikers' bodies were later found mutilated in complete disarray, radioactive and dead. Most were students or graduates of Ural Polytechnical Institute. The goal of the 14-day expedition was to reach Otorten, a mountain 12 miles north of the site of the incident. This route at that season was estimated as Category 3, the most difficult. All members were experienced in long ski tours and mountain expeditions. However, when the bodies were found, 5 students appeared to have died from hypothermia. The remaining 4 hikers had even more inexplicable injuries. One had a fractured skull, another had a twisted neck. 2 were missing their eyes, and one of the bodies with no eyes was also missing her tongue. The searchers found the abandoned and badly damaged tent on Kholat Syakhl. Mikhail Sharavin, the student who found the tent, said, "The tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind." Investigators said the tent had been cut open from inside and that skiers had fled in socks or barefoot. A chain of 8 or 9 sets of footprints, left by several people who were wearing socks, a single shoe or barefoot, could be followed and led down towards the edge of nearby woods. At the forest edge, under a large old cedar, the search party found the remains of a fire, along with the first 2 bodies, those of Yuri Krivoshenko and Yuri Doroshenko, shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. The branches on the tree were broken up to 5 meters high. The medical examiner recorded livor mortis on the back, but Krivoshenko was found facing up. This indicated that someone had moved them after their death. On February 27th, between the cedar and the tent, the searchers found Igor Dyatlov and Zenaida Kolmogorova, and 6 days later, on March 5th, Rustem Slobodin. The 3 seemed to have died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the tent. A medical examination found no injuries which might have led to their deaths, and it was concluded that they had died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but it was not thought to be a fatal wound. A legal inquest started immediately after finding the first 5 bodies. Searching for the remaining 4 hikers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on May 5th under 4 meters of snow in a ravine 50 meters farther into the woods from the cedar tree. These 4 were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that those who had died first had apparently relinquished their clothes to the others. Thibaut Brignol was wearing Dubinina's fur coat and hat. Dubinina's was wearing a brown sweater that tested radioactive and was most probably Krivoshenko's. Zolotaryov had Doroshenko's hat, and Kolevatov was wearing Doroshenko's overalls. The waistband of his sweater and lower part of his ski trousers tested radioactive. An examination of the 4 bodies found in May changed the course of the whole investigation. 3 of them had fatal injuries. The body of Thibaut Brignol had major skull damage, and both Dubinina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures. According to Dr. Boris Vozrojdeny, the force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high. He compared it to the force of a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds, as if they were crippled by a high level of pressure. Dubinina was found to be missing her tongue. But things were about to get even more bizarre. Bodies were actually found a few feet from their improvised shelter in the deep part of the ravine. Seemingly, something terrified these skiers so much they fled from their campsite. What it was, no one knows. But something possibly violent happened, some say supernatural or out of this world. The Dyatlov Pass incident is still one of the great mysteries in the histories. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28+ years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. Call 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
See, whoever had this advanced knowledge, or hidden knowledge is a better term. I mean, you look around the planet and I'm not going to really point fingers at the Vatican or at the kings and the queens of the day. It's just generally who ran around the planet for 500 years, pillaging the records from previous civilizations, putting it in a repository. After you studied all that data, would you not have a very good indication of when it would onset, how fast it would onset before it actually became a problem, before the crops were being lost to a point that then hungry people reset civilization. They reset governments. Hungry people are angry people, and that's the whole thing. It's not about the sun's doing its, a change in frequency, or it is distribution problems, because, you fly over, I don't know if anybody's ever taken a plane ride over the United States, for example. It's almost all empty, except for, deposits of where these cities are. It's a distribution problem, and you nailed that on the head. So it's the distribution of food to the populace, but also working against all these changes in cloud cells, jet streams, and precipitation patterns that are brought on by that solar activity change. Map that out, understand when the onset is, when the amplification is, and through several of these through the past that, choose your genre, whether it be South America, Central America, Asia, Australia, of those who had documented dozens of these events that had occurred prior, going back thousands and thousands of years. You would know at which point it would upset society where, emperors in China had lost their mandate from heaven to rule people because they couldn't produce enough food. Bring forward to today where nobody knows how to grow food. You're relying on a supermarket. What kind of world does that take us to? Well, you can collapse the economy under the guise of war and then put this scatter wave out in front of everybody. So when the food losses come, the excuses are already baked in why there wasn't enough food. It all revolves around the food. Everything else on the periphery, that's all a distraction. Food production, extra calories allow a society to increase and grow its potential because there's extra calories, so you can do those mathematical problems. You can solve those engineering diagrams. You can come up with art because you got extra calories. You're not worried about growing your food for the day to stay alive. Who mapped it out in advance already and knows the onset, the amplification, and then at that point, when people become hungry, they become violent and unpredictable enough to flip governments. And it's all on a timeline. It seems like it's all scripted. We talked about this last time. They already know the cycle. So where are we in this whole A to B right now?
Yeah, it's interesting now also because one of the things that I think a lot of people will notice out there is that the global elite, if we want to call them that, they are preparing for something. The government here in the United States, they don't even give a anymore about perception or optics. And it's almost as if they know something is going to happen and it's all not going to matter after that. And they're just getting themselves ready. And I think that that's kind of where we're at right now, is that all of these people know what's happening. I mean, you talked about the Vatican or whoever it might be that's brought about all this documentation over the years. And I think that you're absolutely right. We've seen it in the various different records, from whether it's occult and the esoteric or mythology or just ancient cultures. They talked about this. They talked about this specifically. So what are your thoughts on who's been documenting this and measuring the magnitude of it?
Those who you talk about, the families of old, and you have to think about what was passed down post Younger Dryas. Because if you understand that concept of some sort of cometary fragment slammed into the ice sheets in Canada. Now let me spin your mind for a second. So far, if we just use history as we understand it, 10,000 years ago, humans evolved from 10 million, let's say, breeding pairs. And I'm going to, bring it down into that kind of format. And then from there, we started to really increase population. And 8,000 years ago, temperature dropped for no reason. Well, the sun. And then it knocked population back down again. And then, you get these ups and downs. And if you follow back through the climatic record, you're going to find that there's these apex and then declines in our civilization, along with the temperature record, food production, et cetera, economy, and you'll see it, global trade. Now, we've established a certain plant by date and harvest by date in the last 8,000 years, and then we've come up with some sort of commerce structure and economic structure. Originally it was shells, and then it turned into gold and silver, and then it turned into what we have today, and now we're moving to digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, et cetera, crypto, moving away from fiat. That's 8,000 years of time. I'll be generous and say 10,000. I'll be super generous. 10,000 years of time. But you got to think, when we entered that last ice age 100,000 years ago, they had a stable climate for the people of the time, however many there were. I'll reel you back to say 18,000, 21,000, and we'll round it off at 20, because that's really when a lot of changes were coming climatically, when they could see where the end of this glaciation was occurring. So if we go from 80,000 years to 20,000 years, that's 60,000 years of time of stable climate during an ice age, because the ice would have locked in.
Mm-hmm.
They would have had stable climate for 60,000 years. What have we done in 8,000, 10,000 years? They got 6 times longer of the history. So what was the technology of the time? What types of records were there? How many cycles had they gone through, and the mini cycles in between their stable climates as well? And who was documenting all of that? That's really where you kind of need to preface it before you look at the families now, and you look at the church and the Vatican and these royals. And, you know, it's an invasive hominid species is kind of the best answer I can give to you, that survived through the cataclysm, that had enough tech left over and enough power and understood the mechanisms to reset a society, that is now this parasite class that moves us through where we sit today. I know it's long-winded, but I hope I answered some of that question.
No, I think it's spot on and very conducive to what we talk about here. And it's interesting to think about a civilization that was 60,000 years in expanse of technological development, because you're right, what they haven't developed. And now we go back to the old, the old mythology of Atlantis, and how Atlantis was destroyed by their own accord. I mean, I've had multiple guests talk about this, that there was 2 different classes in Atlantis, and the one class was this kind of mechanistic, non-spiritual class, very technologist, and that they had basically destroyed Atlantis on their own. And you got to wonder if that was done for a reason, if they knew that this was all happening, and they looked at a way to control the planet, to seize power once and for all if something went wrong. But then you also have to take into account all the underground tunnel systems under the majority of the major cities throughout the world. I mean, the one that was just discovered in China a few years back and housed over 1 million people in these underground cavern systems. And so in my thoughts is they knew what was happening. They knew it was going to happen. The question is how did they destroy themselves? And if that was intentional, or did it just get, destroyed along the process of the rebuild period 8,000 years ago?
Is it the same consciousness that invoked those people to develop the world that, I'm going to use the word it, wanted for them, using humanity at that time also for the destruction? Because if you look at, I don't care what religion you go to, there's always this duality of light and darkness. But this darkness seems to come to a point where it almost envelops everything, but this single, candle light is enough to repel the darkness. This spark of consciousness that does bring us back, then pushes that darkness away for thousands of years, and then somehow it gets that hold again. And it's this ebb and flow of dark and light. So if you look at the yin yang, it's almost like that, movement of within, this rhythm within, darkness overtaking light, light overtaking darkness. And there's always that, why are those 2 spheres in there? That's the point within. Nothing is 100% anywhere in the universe. And I do think that consciousness had something to do with that. But if we come back and just roll it back into the cities here, like everybody's very familiar with Deryanku in Turkey, and there's quite a few other cities in Turkey that are underground. Mm-hmm. So in Czech Republic, I had a chance to visit a place called Neumo, which is in it's in the south and the east, and it's a wine growing region. But they had 40,000 people living underground. This is an unknown place. It's out in the middle of the vineyards right now. But there was an underground tunnel system, and that a main artery, if you will, that connected under a river and then into the next set of cliffs and valleys across. But they're all connected where the castles are, where they go beneath. Down in there, I am definitely not. I've been to Deryanku, but I thought it was cool and everything. The one in Neumo was damn claustrophobic, and I can just say that. There's 0% chance that I could live under that. So you got to think about what kind of event would push people underground.
Right.
To the point that you're going to live like a tunnel rat to live under there to stay alive. For me, coming from the sunlight and going in there, even for several hours, I can't wait to get out of here. It's exciting. You can see underground wells. You can see where they had fires. But again, I bring it back to, was the energy source that they were using these several thousand years ago the same thing that we are told they're fire pits? Because with that much smoke, you're talking, let's use the example for the Chinese cities that were, if you go further out in Donghuang and out further west out there, you're telling me 1 million people are underground cooking with firewood. Can you imagine the smoke coming through an underground city? That would have to be the most advanced engineering on the planet to vent smoke from, let's say there's 4 people, and okay, families were bigger. Let's say 8 people per family divided by 1 million. How many families does that give you? All using firewood to cook their food every single day, 3 times a day. How much smoke is there? And what about those at the lower layers? Like, how did they vent and bring in new oxygen sources when they were venting out all of this, carbon dioxide, different kinds of detritus and ash and everything in addition to the gases? You're telling me the engineering, that doesn't make sense to me either. And just even seeing it with 40,000 people.
It's almost as if the caverns themselves are shells of something that used to be there.
Yeah, that they re-inhabited what was already inhabited with the ventilation systems that they didn't create it. They knew, just like we know now. Some areas in the United States, where there's a 1940s bomb shelter from the nuclear scare. You know where that is, like tucked away. It's under a sewer. You got to plop it off. Or you can throw out the manhole cover. You get down in, but there's like records of it. And if you bash down the door, you can finally get in there.
Yep.
It's the exact same thing. This Antiquitech has been not developed, but rediscovered, in my opinion. And this all rolls back into these cycles. But who had the original thoughts or the original technology, far older than that, to create such complex systems? And you talk about, distribution. Air is the most important thing a human can breathe. So how do you get distributed air down through for free to 1 million people underground so they don't suffocate? That is not of our time. That is something from an older, forgotten or suppressed technology era.
And it appears too that if there was anything down there, infrastructure, technology, which there had to have been, it's long since been removed. And this is interesting point because I followed the UAP aspects that are going on in Congress. We've reported on this, been absolutely validated in our information, what we said. But there's one piece that I've been saying for the last few months that I think people need to come to terms and realize is, and David Grush has talked about this in very little, but hinted towards it, is that the things that are being encountered over our nuke facilities, the things that are being encountered over the ocean, these orbs that are defying gravity, moving at radical speeds, these have been here for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. That these are most likely the remnants of an ancient civilization. One of the keys that we know about this is that there's certain spacecraft that will come from somewhere, who knows, I don't know where the hell they're coming from, but they get shot down. And the question is how are they getting shot down? Well, what we got back was that these orbs that are coming up over the ocean, these are the things that are shooting them down, almost like a planetary defense system. Now, I find that kind of interesting, but it draws into this aspect that there is this lost ancient civilization. There's technology from this ancient civilization that's still existent on this planet. And obviously the governments of the world and the elites of the world are trying to get their hands on it in any way, shape, or form.
They're missing the key ingredient to having it all work and function properly. Consciousness.
I agree with
that. And the integration with the physical, to integrate with the hardware, to integrate with the tech on the consciousness side. So they're trying to integrate it all into what we understand as just This is a plasma field breaking through what we consider air, the energy that exists in the ether around them. So it's not going to be nearly as effective when they're missing an entire part of the system that's supposed to be integrated. So we are going to have to come to such a high level of consciousness that, but you got to realize the magnetic field on our planet is very different than what was experienced at that time as well. During an ice age, the magnetic field would have been very, 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 very different than it is now with a high active sun. So we're talking about magnetic field intensities. So the meditating monks at the highest levels of the Himalaya, compared to this high magnetic field, compare it with somebody who's in an extremely low magnetic field in the middle of an ice age doing the same thing. We're going to have two completely different outcomes of their ability to blend with this physical reality and this integration of the ether.
One of the things in the heart of my research for at least the last 10 years, and everybody knows this, is we've connected, obviously, the sun cycles, solar flares, so forth, to various different seismic activity on this planet. And obviously, in the last decade, it's ramped up significantly. Volcanic activity, seismic activity. On the other hand, one of the things that we've discussed was the galactic cycles, in the sense of where we are on the galactic side and where our solar system is moving through. And I think this is one of the things that we touched on last time with our conversation, is that we have different densities of cosmic radiation that we're moving through. And that we can look at the analemma of our solar system moving through the galactic arm, the kind of outside perspective of the full. So I don't know if you saw this. There was an article in Nature in 2020, the discovery of what they call Radcliffe waves. Radcliffe waves are for stellar nurseries, and they're big sine waves that move through the galactic arm. And I just found it interesting. Like, you read this article, you read all the interesting research on this, and nobody talks about what happens after those stellar nurseries form stars. They don't talk about anything about how the stars still ride these same Radcliffe waves up and down the galactic arm, going through variations of cosmic dust and gases and densities of energy. And I said, well, that's going to have a profound effect on your solar cycles. It's going to have a profound effect on the planets when that happens. And my theory is that evolution is built into the galaxy, built into the universe. And that we just came out of winter and we now just reached that spring time frame in that transit of that galactic arm. And so we're in that rebirth period. And this is what's prompting all of this massive solar activity that we're going to see over the next few thousand years. And this is what causes the massive climatic changes. But also it produces high level changes in consciousness. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, it's hard to ignore that at least since 2016, the present, there has massively been a transition of the global zeitgeist, of the spirit of our times, of the consciousness of our times, that people are thinking differently. People are thinking outside the box. People are no longer accepting the constructed norm. People are no longer playing the game, and people are expanding with ideas and thoughts and consciousness. And to me, we're in the process of a new birth of conscious evolution. And I don't want to go to the whole 5D stuff and ascension stuff, but we truly are growing and expanding within our minds. And I believe that it's cosmically oriented. And this is one of the key factors that comes about within these cycles. What are your thoughts on that?
Is anything new under the sun? If you look at the Indian Vedic text, they map out the Yuga cycles. So we are coming out of the Kali Yuga. And this is the thing that it is so pinpointed to today. So you have to realize that at the very lowest of what they consider the Iron Age, this is the Indian tradition. So I'm going to try to relate this from, the Indian traditions over into as a way we can explain it in our words in English for the Western culture here. We've exited out of the Iron Age, but the Iron Age was the very lowest vibratory point that literally a human can attain. What is the cycle that comes around? Now, at the apex of this in the Golden Age, this is where we see like instant manifestation, but then the consciousness connection between everybody, there is none of this. Oh, I want to get ahead in the job. I want to have a bigger house. This doesn't make sense. because we all understand the interconnectedness of all of our spirits from consciousness source itself. At that point of instant manifestation, it's for the betterment of all humanity. But think about that. Every human on the planet instantly manifesting to create a better world for every human on the planet, multiplied by however many people are on that sphere at the time. So if you're going to go back to the 1600s, 1400s, we had the church burning people alive at the stake. Like if you were to try to bring that same mechanism of control right to today, we would call that barbaric or barbarism. That would not even hold state for 1/5 of 1/8 of a second before people said that's unacceptable as a way to oversee. It can't exist in this state of vibration. It is so low vibrating energy of a consciousness controls, mechanism or construct for humanity that we've outgrown that. There's no way they can implement that again on top. And even if they try, see, that's the thing you hit on. The vibratory pattern every day is getting lighter and faster in the vibration. This is why everything you see in the world is resetting right now. Mm-hmm. The old world, see, these leaders and, global controllers, they understand that the vibratory pattern's changing with this change on our sun. That the old world constructs to keep you under control of whatever that was that controlled you to produce for it no longer is valid, because we've stepped up several steps really quick. That's why people are understanding. They're seeing through. They're breaking through the programming. They're seeing something that is in their face now. You hear people saying things that you never thought they would ever say, and you're like shocked, knocked back in your chair, like, what did you, huh? And I know everybody out there has had at least one experience where you're like, that, no, I thought I would never heard that person say that. So the world we know has to be reconfigured around this new vibratory pattern. So if we're coming into like universal basic income, or we're coming into central bank digital currencies, coming into a new global trading mechanism where they realize there has to be at least some level board where one entity can't control the entire planet, because that vibratory pattern of war and destruction can't hold state any longer. So they know it can't last. They understand that with the frequency change. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to let it go slowly, but you're going to milk as much wealth out of that and transfer the wealth to another place where it is growing up, and they understand that BRICS aligned nations, everything's about cooperation. Nothing goes to zero. So they're going to take the old system, and it's becoming null and void, understandable. But at that same time, they're just taking piece by piece by piece by piece and extracting that wealth and moving it into a different system, which also, Bank for International Settlements is right in control of that. So it's not as if they're breaking free of the American dollar influence, the war machine running around the planet, forcing you at gunpoint to adopt American policies and business practice and give preferential treatment for our corporations. Nothing like that. Bank for International Settlements is still in control of BRICS. You're looking at settlement and clearance for the entire planet, central bank for the central bankers. Bank for International Settlements is in control of the new BRICS-aligned nations. So really nothing, there's nothing new under the sun. Right. The only thing I can say for that is, as much as the vibratory pattern changed for the church burning people alive to try to, implement dogma on top of the entire world, it lasted for a while. But they understood the pattern change too around 1640, when the grand solar minimum hit, at that time called the modern minimum, and they had to switch lickety split because they were being overthrown left, right, and center. We're finding the same thing right now. So many people are awakening. They're like, nah, this is not kosher. This is not happening right now. We need a new system. We need a new way to do things without America, without this bludgeoning hammer coming across the world saying, do what we do, or we remove your leaders and bomb your country and take you back to the Stone Age. That is no different in the equivalent. We're just going to fast forward 600 or 800 years. We're repeating the same pattern. Now it's got to shift again. So is BRICS, it might sound like a great thing. Oh, everybody's in equal harmony. They're trying to cooperate. They're going to share resources. They're going to share this. Everybody's, okay, this is just the newest iteration because the vibratory pattern changed. Guarantee you, when that vibratory pattern changes again and it steps up 2 or 3 levels, BRICS will be a dead in the water thing, and they're going to milk and transfer wealth to a new system yet unknown.
Right.
I don't know. I'm maybe, you know.
No. I think you're right in a lot of context there, because I've talked about the Bank of International Settlement. Last year in July, they put out their Unified Ledger Framework. And it was kind of surprising to a lot of us in the sense of the liberty that was brought about in the Unified Ledger Framework, because what you had on the infrastructure is you had CBDC in the center for inter-exchange and interoperability. Basically, the CBDC was primarily utilized for cross-payment, cross-exchange, central bank communications, and everything else was private tokenization. And this matched exactly what I said. If you remember, about 3 years ago, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and BlackRock were buying up entire neighborhoods that were being built during COVID that the builders abandoned. So they're buying up 250 houses at a time. And I said, you watch what's going to happen. They're going to take these houses in. They're going to hold on to them. Inflation's going to keep on skyrocketing. Mortgage rates are going to keep on skyrocketing. Everything's going to keep on skyrocketing. Then what's going to happen is these corporations, these massive financial institutions, are going to come out with their own blockchains and their own cryptocurrency, and it's going to be accepted everywhere. And since you bank with them, they're going to give you the option, hey, come on, we'll transfer your paycheck directly over 1.1, 1.2, 1.5x multiple. You put it into our cryptocurrency. We're going to offer you 3% mortgages. We're going to offer you 6% loans. By utilizing our private tokenization, you can live in our neighborhood under that mortgage. You're going to have a grocery store that's going to accept this cryptocurrency with the food that we stock in there. Your car loans, personal loans, all of the debt will be controlled by privatized organizations over governments, where governments will just be in the regulatory and the policy aspect of managing them. And we're moving towards that nightmare of corporatism, to where it takes over the world, but it takes over the financial aspect of the world.
We don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.